I'm Emma, 36, and last Sunday my parents invited me for what they called an important family dinner. When I arrived, my siblings Sarah and Jake were already there, wearing these smug little smiles. Then my parents dropped the bomb. They'd updated their will, leaving everything to my siblings. I was explicitly excluded. After I'd taken months off work to care for them during their illnesses, they told me I don't deserve anything because of my poor life choices. As I sat there, fighting back tears, one thought crystallized. They had no idea what they just set in motion. Before I dive into this family drama that completely changed my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family betrayal. Trust me, what happened next in my story will show you exactly why standing up for yourself is worth it, even against your own family. To understand why my parents' announcement hit me like a freight train, you need to know a bit about our family history. I grew up in Westfield, Connecticut, the oldest of three, in what looked like the perfect upper-middle-class family from the outside. My father, Richard, built a successful manufacturing business from scratch, something he never let anyone forget. My mother, Diana, used his success to climb the local social ladder, joining all the right clubs and committees. From day one, our family operated on a simple principle: achievement equals love. Straight A's, sports trophies, prestigious schools. These were the currency of affection in our house. As the oldest, I set the bar initially, bringing home academic awards and captaining the debate team. But somewhere in high school, I discovered art, and everything changed. "Artists don't make money, Emma," my father would say, dismissively glancing at my sketchbooks. "It's a hobby, not a career." My mother was equally discouraging. "No one respectable marries a starving artist, dear." Despite their disapproval, I pursued a fine arts degree at RISD, while Sarah went to Harvard Law and Jake attended Wharton Business School. The divide grew with each passing year. Sarah became a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm, and Jake joined my father's business, positioned to take over someday. Meanwhile, I built a respectable career as an artist with gallery showings across New England and a decent income. Not that my parents ever acknowledged it. What makes this whole situation so bitter is that I was always the responsible one. When my parents traveled, I looked after my siblings. When my grandparents needed help, I was the one who drove 3 hours every weekend to check on them. When my grandfather was dying, I spent weeks at his bedside while Sarah and Jake were too busy with their careers. The pattern of favoritism was always there, but I told myself it was in my head. When Sarah got a car for her 16th birthday while I had worked summers to buy my own at the same age, it was because times were different. When Jake's business mistakes were forgiven while my artistic accomplishments were ignored, it was because the business is the family legacy. Last year, my ex-husband cheated on me with his assistant, a classic cliché that somehow my parents turned against me. "If you'd been more attentive instead of focusing on your painting all the time," my mother suggested during what should have been a supportive call. My father didn't even try for subtlety. "He needed someone stable, Emma. You've always been too creative." Through all of this, my best friend Melissa has been my rock, along with my Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister who experienced similar treatment from their parents. The family pattern repeats. Aunt Margaret told me once, "Your mother was the golden child, I was the scapegoat." Now she's creating the same dynamic with her children. The most infuriating part is that just last year, I put my career on hold for nearly 4 months to care for both my parents. My father had unexpected heart surgery that required extensive rehabilitation, and during his recovery, my mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. While Sarah made occasional weekend appearances and Jake helped financially, from the family business no less, I was the one administering medications, driving to doctor appointments, cooking meals, and providing emotional support. I slept in their guest room for 14 weeks. I postponed 2 gallery showings. I lost a commission I'd been working toward for months. And the entire time, both parents complained about my unstable job and how lucky I was to have the flexibility to help them, as if it were a benefit of my hobby rather than a significant professional sacrifice. When I finally returned to my studio, exhausted and emotionally drained, It took months to rebuild my creative momentum and client relationships. Not once did either of my parents acknowledge this sacrifice. Instead, they bragged to their friends about Sarah's recent promotion and Jake's business insights. So when they invited me to this important family dinner, some naive part of me thought perhaps they'd finally recognized everything I'd done for them. Maybe they'd realized that success isn't measured solely by the size of your paycheck or the prestige of your business card. I couldn't have been more wrong. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Mom had prepared her signature roast beef, the meal she reserves for special occasions, and Dad had opened an expensive bottle of Cabernet. Sarah arrived wearing a designer suit straight from her law office, while Jake sported his usual smirk and a golf tan. They exchanged knowing glances when I walked in, which should have been my first clue something was off. "Emma, you're finally here," my mother said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Now we can begin." The small talk lasted through the appetizers, hollow conversations about weather and neighborhood gossip. When my father cleared his throat as the main course was served, I sensed the real purpose of the evening was about to be revealed. "We've been doing some estate planning," he announced, cutting precisely into his meat. "Your mother and I are getting older, and it's important to have these matters settled." I nodded, taking a sip of wine. At 36, I was old enough to handle a mature conversation about my parents' end-of-life wishes. "We've updated our will," my mother continued, her voice overly casual. "The house, the business, the investments, they'll be going to Sarah and Jake." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I set down my glass carefully. "And what about me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from their expressions. My father looked me straight in the eye. "Nothing, Emma. You're not included." The bluntness of it knocked the air from my lungs. "May I ask why?" "Your siblings have proven their worth," he said flatly. "They've built successful careers. They contribute to society. They've given us grandchildren. They've made responsible choices." Each word felt like a slap. My childlessness, the result of a medical condition discovered during my marriage, thrown at me as a moral failing. My mother jumped in with her practiced, passive-aggressive tone. "Darling, if you'd chosen a real career instead of dabbling in art, things might be different. We need to know our legacy is in capable hands." Sarah couldn't contain her satisfaction. "It's nothing personal, Em. Someone needs to make sure the family assets are properly managed." The condescension in her voice made it clear she didn't consider me capable of managing a piggy bank. Jake was even less subtle. "Maybe you should have listened to Dad years ago when he offered to pay for business school. Choices have consequences." He smirked, swirling his wine. "Though I guess you can always sell one of your little paintings if you need money." I sat there, my food untouched, as they discussed my exclusion as if I weren't present. My mother detailed how the house would be converted to a vacation property for my siblings' families. My father explained how the business transition to Jake would work. Sarah outlined the tax advantages of their arrangement. What hurt most wasn't the money. I'd built my life without their financial support. It was the deliberate, public rejection. The statement that I wasn't truly part of the family. "I took care of you," I finally said, my voice barely audible. "Last year, when you were sick. 4 months. I put everything on hold." My father waved his hand dismissively. "That's what family does. It doesn't entitle you to compensation." "Sarah and Jake contributed too," my mother added. "They called regularly." The absurdity of equating their occasional phone calls with my round-the-clock caregiving was the final straw. I stood up, steadier than I felt. "Thank you for making your feelings clear," I said, surprised by my own calm. "I won't take any more of your time." I walked out despite their half-hearted protests, not because they wanted me to stay, but because my departure disrupted their perfect dinner tableau. In my car, the composure finally broke. I sobbed until my ribs ached, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in my world. That night, I called Melissa, who listened to my tearful recounting with appropriate outrage. "You need to talk to a lawyer," she insisted. "This doesn't sound right, especially after everything you've done for them." "They're allowed to leave their money to whoever they want," I said. "It's their property." "Maybe," she replied, "but something feels off. My cousin Alex specializes in estate law. Just talk to him. As a favor to me." After hanging up, I couldn't sleep. I dug out old family photo albums from my closet, flipping through images of birthdays, holidays, graduations. In photo after photo, the pattern was clear. Sarah and Jake front and center, receiving trophies, blowing out candles, opening the biggest gifts. Me on the periphery, often behind the camera instead of in front of it. I found a particular photo that broke something inside me. My high school art show, where I'd won a regional prize. My parents had attended only because it coincided with Sarah's debate club meeting at the same school. In the picture, they stood beside my winning painting, looking distracted and checked out, while I beamed proudly beside them, oblivious to their indifference. That night, something shifted in me. The hurt transformed into something harder, more resolute. I decided I wouldn't accept this final rejection lying down. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. A lifetime of having my contributions devalued and my existence treated as secondary. By morning, I had made up my mind. I would find out if there was more to this story, and I would fight for the recognition I deserved. If my family wanted to treat this as a business transaction rather than a family matter, then I would respond in kind. The following Monday, I met Melissa's cousin Alex at his downtown law office. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind fashionable glasses. Estate conflicts are more common than people realize, he said after hearing my story. And they're rarely just about money. They're about recognition, about validation. Can anything be done? I asked. Legally, I mean. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. Wills can be contested under certain circumstances. Undue influence, diminished capacity, fraud. But it's difficult to prove, and the courts generally respect a person's right to distribute their assets as they choose, even if it seems unfair. I nodded, disappointed but not surprised. That said, he continued, sometimes there are other factors at play. How much do you know about your family's finances? Not much, I admitted. My father's always been private about money matters. And the business? Your brother works there, right? Yes. He's been Dad's right-hand man for years. Alex leaned forward. If you're willing to dig a little, we might find there's more to the story. Family businesses can be complicated, especially when it comes to succession planning. That conversation was the beginning of my investigation. With Alex's guidance, I began researching my family's finances, starting with public records about my father's business, Westfield Manufacturing. What I discovered shocked me. The company had been struggling for years, taking out loans, selling off assets, downsizing staff. According to their financial filings, they'd been operating at a loss for the past 3 quarters. When I shared this with Alex, he frowned. If the business is failing, why are your parents so intent on passing it to your brother? And why does he want it? The question haunted me. I reached out to an old friend, Tristan, who had worked in accounting at my father's company before leaving abruptly 2 years ago. Over coffee, he hesitated before sharing what he knew. I left because of ethical concerns, he admitted. Jake was mismanaging company funds, shifting money between accounts, falsifying records. When I questioned it, I was let go. Did my father know? I asked, stunned. I tried to tell him, but Jake intercepted my reports. Your father trusts him completely. Digging deeper, I discovered Sarah's law firm had been handling the company's legal affairs despite clear conflict of interest issues. She had helped create a complex web of shell companies and trusts that seemed designed to hide financial improprieties. Most disturbing was the evidence that my siblings had been systematically draining my parents' personal assets. Refinanced mortgages on properties I'd never known about. Investment accounts emptied. Loans taken out against life insurance policies. While searching through old family papers in my apartment, I found something unexpected. A reference to a family trust established by my grandmother before she died. I'd been close to my grandmother, an independent woman who had appreciated my artistic sensibilities. The document suggested she had created a trust that predated my parents' current will. I took this information to Alex, who helped me locate the full trust documents through probate court records. What we found was stunning. My grandmother had established a trust stipulating that the family home and a significant portion of her assets were to be divided equally among all her grandchildren. This is significant, Alex said, reviewing the paperwork. According to these documents, your father never had full ownership rights to transfer. The property was held in trust for all 3 grandchildren. Why wouldn't they have told me about this? I wondered. Let's find out, he suggested. Your grandmother's attorney is still alive, retired, but alive. The next day, I sat in Arnold Fitzgerald's living room, surrounded by mementos of a long legal career. At 82, his mind was still sharp, and he remembered my grandmother fondly. Charlotte was a remarkable woman, he said, adjusting his reading glasses to examine the trust documents. Very concerned about fairness. She saw how your father favored your siblings, even back then. She created this trust to protect me? I asked. He nodded. She worried your contributions to the family would be overlooked. This trust was her way of ensuring you received your fair share, regardless of your parents' wishes. But they never told me about it. They were informed. He assured me. I personally met with your parents and explained the terms after Charlotte's passing. They weren't pleased, but the trust was ironclad. Back at Alex's office, we assembled the pieces. Not only had my parents concealed the trust's existence from me, but there was evidence my siblings had been improperly accessing funds from it for years. Sarah's actions are particularly troubling, Alex noted. As an attorney, she would have understood the legal implications. There could be ethical violations here. The picture becoming clear was disturbing. My siblings had been manipulating my parents and draining family resources while systematically working to exclude me. The will announcement wasn't just about inheritance. It was the culmination of a years-long campaign to erase me from the family financial picture entirely. Most painful was finding emails between Sarah and Jake discussing strategies for turning my parents against me. Emma's divorce gives us the perfect opportunity, Sarah had written. Dad already thinks artists are unstable. If we emphasize how her career choices led to her marriage failing, it reinforces the narrative. Another email from Jake mentioned my caregiving period. Emma's spending so much time with them now, we need to make sure they don't get sentimental. Keep reminding them about her gallery showing getting canceled. Frame it as her being unreliable professionally. The evidence was overwhelming. My siblings hadn't just benefited from my parents' favoritism. They had actively engineered it, deliberately sabotaging my relationship with my parents to secure their own financial interests. I sat in Alex's office, staring at the stack of documents we'd accumulated. What do I do with all this? Legally, you have a strong case, he said. The trust gives you standing. The financial mismanagement gives you leverage. The evidence of deception strengthens your position. I don't just want money, I clarified. I want acknowledgement. I want them to recognize what they've done. Alex nodded understanding. Then I suggest we prepare thoroughly. And when you're ready, confront them with what you know. Sometimes, the truth is the most powerful tool we have. After weeks of investigation, I found myself sitting in the reading room of the county records office, surrounded by boxes of archived documents. My grandmother, Charlotte's trust, had opened a door to family secrets I never imagined existed. The trust itself was more significant than I initially realized. Beyond the family home, it included ownership stakes in 3 commercial properties, investment accounts, and a substantial insurance policy. Conservative estimates put the total value at over $4 million. Split 3 ways, it would still be life-changing money. More important than the amount was the intent behind it. The trust stipulated explicitly that the assets were to be divided equally among all my grandchildren, with no exclusions. My grandmother had even included a letter explaining her reasoning. Having observed the treatment of my grandchildren, I fear that without this provision, Emma's contributions to the family will go unrecognized. While her siblings have chosen conventional paths that their parents value, Emma's artistic spirit and caring nature are equally valuable gifts to this world. This trust ensures that family resources support all my grandchildren equally, regardless of their chosen paths. The documents showed my father never had full ownership rights to transfer the family home or other trust assets. They had been held in trust since my grandmother's death, with my parents having only lifetime use rights. I arranged to meet with Arnold Fitzgerald, my grandmother's former attorney, again. This time, I brought specific questions about how the trust had been managed. Your grandmother was very specific, Arnold explained, reviewing his personal notes. She was particularly concerned about you, Emma. She saw how your artistic talents were dismissed by your parents, and she wanted to ensure you had support. Why would my parents hide this from me? I asked. Arnold sighed. They weren't happy with the arrangement. Your father especially felt it undermined his authority. But legally, they couldn't change it. Charlotte made me the trustee specifically to prevent interference. Then how have my siblings been accessing the trust funds? Arnold looked surprised. They shouldn't have been. After I retired 5 years ago, the trusteeship was supposed to transfer to the firm's senior partner. Let me make some calls. His calls revealed a disturbing pattern. Shortly after Arnold's retirement, Sarah had presented documents to the firm claiming Arnold had transferred trusteeship to my father before retiring. Documents that Arnold confirmed were forgeries. Using her position at her law firm, she had effectively circumvented the trust's protections. This is serious, Arnold said gravely. What your sister did constitutes fraud. As an attorney, she could face disbarment. The investigation yielded another treasure: my grandmother's personal journals, which Arnold had preserved. In them, she documented her concerns about my parents' favoritism in heartbreaking detail. Richard and Diana make no attempt to hide their preference for Sarah and Jake. Today at Emma's art exhibition, they spent the entire time talking about Jake's baseball game, while Emma's beautiful paintings surrounded them. The child notices. I see it in her eyes. She tries so hard for their approval that will never come because they value only what they understand. Another entry, dated shortly before her death. I've spoken with Arnold about the trust. Emma will need protection from what I fear will come. Richard has already begun grooming Jake to take over the business, speaking of legacy, while ignoring his oldest child's gifts. I cannot stop their favoritism, but I can ensure Emma isn't left with nothing after a lifetime of giving everything. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by journals and legal documents, I felt my grandmother's presence, her attempt to protect me from beyond the grave. It was both heartwarming and profoundly sad that she had seen so clearly what would happen. Alex's assessment of our legal position was strong. The trust is ironclad, he confirmed. The evidence of fraud is substantial. We could file for immediate intervention by the court, remove your father and siblings from any control, and enforce the original terms. And Sarah? I asked. The ethical violations are clear. Forgery, conflict of interest, misuse of client information. The state bar would definitely investigate. I thought about the implications. Legal action would mean public exposure of family secrets. My siblings could face serious consequences. Criminal charges for Jake, potential disbarment for Sarah. My parents would be humiliated in the community they valued so much. Despite everything, I hesitated. These were still my parents, still my siblings. Did I want to destroy them, or did I want them to recognize what they'd done and make amends? Let me think about how to proceed, I told Alex. That night, I called Aunt Margaret and told her everything we'd discovered. Your grandmother tried to tell me, she said softly. She saw the pattern repeating from our generation to yours. I should have done more to help you see it sooner. What would you do? I asked. After a long pause, she answered, give them one chance to make it right. Just one. Then do what you must. I knew she was right. Before taking legal action, I needed to confront my family with what I knew. Not out of vengeance, but because they deserved one opportunity to choose a better path. Would you confront your family with evidence of their betrayal, or just take them straight to court? This part of my journey was the hardest emotional challenge I've ever faced. If you're finding value in my story, please tap that like button to help others find it too, and let me know in the comments if you've ever discovered family secrets that changed everything. For the next 3 weeks, I worked with Alex to develop a comprehensive strategy. This wasn't just about confronting my family with what I knew. It was about being prepared for every possible outcome. The element of surprise is crucial, Alex advised during one of our planning sessions. Once they know you're aware of the trust and the financial misdeeds, they'll move quickly to cover their tracks. We decided on a 2-phase approach. First, a private confrontation with my parents alone, giving them the opportunity to correct course voluntarily. If that failed, we would proceed with formal legal action involving all parties. Timing was critical. Through discreet inquiries, I learned my father had scheduled an important board meeting in 3 weeks to announce Jake's promotion to company president. The financial documents we'd uncovered suggested this was part of a larger strategy to offload company debts before a potential bankruptcy filing. That gives us our deadline, Alex noted. The confrontation should happen before that announcement, but we need all our evidence in order first. I spent days combing through my father's business records, uncovering a pattern of financial mismanagement that went beyond what we'd initially found. Jake had been siphoning company funds through fraudulent vendor contracts, while tax documents showed concerning discrepancies that could constitute tax evasion. My research into Sarah's activities was equally disturbing. She had used her position at her law firm to handle family legal matters that represented clear conflicts of interest. The forged trustee documents were just the beginning. She had systematically misrepresented financial information to both the firm and to our parents. To build our case, I meticulously documented every instance of my support for my parents over the years. Medical records showing my signature as caregiver during their illnesses. Financial records of expenses I'd covered during that period. Text messages and emails documenting my daily involvement in their care when my siblings were notably absent. I met again with Aunt Margaret, who provided additional damaging information about conversations she'd had with my mother. Diana told me last Christmas that Sarah had shown her evidence you were planning to sell the family home once you inherited, Aunt Margaret revealed. She said you'd been meeting with real estate developers. Obviously a lie, but your mother believed it. Why would Sarah make that up? I wondered. To poison them against you, Aunt Margaret said simply. They've been playing this game for years, Emma. You just didn't want to see it. As the evidence mounted, I struggled with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to punish my family for years of dismissal, culminating in this ultimate betrayal. Another part simply wanted acknowledgement of my worth and contributions. The competing impulses left me emotionally exhausted. I decided to consult with Dr. Renata Chen, a therapist who specialized in family estrangement issues. During our sessions, she helped me process my feelings and set realistic expectations. What do you ultimately want from this confrontation? She asked during our second session. After considerable thought, I answered, I want them to see me, really see me, to acknowledge that I matter as much as Sarah and Jake, and I want justice for my grandmother's wishes. Those are distinct goals, Dr. Chen noted. Recognition is emotional. Justice is practical. Be prepared for the possibility that you might achieve one without the other. Her words stayed with me as I continued preparations. During this period, my art took on themes of family betrayal and hidden truths. I created a series of mixed media pieces incorporating fragments of my grandmother's journals, overlaid with images of family photos distorted and fragmented. The work was raw and painful, but also cathartic. Melissa visited my studio one evening and stood silently before the largest piece, a triptych representing the 3 siblings, with my panels fractured and partially erased. This is powerful, Emma, she said finally. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next? I'm not sure I'll ever be fully ready, I admitted, but I'm certain I can't go back to pretending. In the final days before the confrontation, Alex and I held multiple strategy sessions with his paralegal and a financial forensics expert he'd brought onto the case. You'll need to record the meeting, Alex advised. Connecticut is a one-party consent state, so it's legal as long as you're part of the conversation. We set up a recording system on my phone and practiced several times to ensure I could activate it discreetly. We also prepared a comprehensive evidence binder with tabs for each category of misconduct, with the most impactful documents highlighted for quick reference. Remember, stay calm and stick to facts. Alex coached me during our final preparation. If they become emotional or defensive, don't get pulled in. Your composure is your strength. The night before the planned confrontation, I called Aunt Margaret one last time. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for supporting me through this, I told her. Your grandmother would be proud, she said. Not just for standing up for yourself, but for giving them a chance to make it right. That shows your character. I slept surprisingly well that night, perhaps because the decision had been made. The strategy was set. There was nothing left but to follow through. In the morning, I dressed carefully in a professional outfit that projected confidence, not the artsy clothes my parents always criticized. I packed the evidence binder into my leather portfolio, checked the recording app on my phone one final time, and headed to my parents' house for a meeting I'd requested to discuss family matters. As I pulled into their driveway, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of what Dr. Chen had said during our last session. Whatever the outcome, you're reclaiming your power. That's a victory in itself. With that thought firmly in mind, I walked to the door, ready to confront decades of family dynamics that had culminated in the ultimate betrayal. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, a time I'd chosen deliberately because Jake would be at the office and Sarah would be in court. My mother answered the door with a look of mild surprise, despite our scheduled appointment. "Emma, I didn't expect you so early," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of subtle disapproval. "I'm right on time, Mom," I replied evenly, stepping inside. The house looked exactly as it always had, immaculate and showcasing all the symbols of my parents' success. Photos of Sarah and Jake dominated the entryway, their achievements chronicled in frames climbing up the staircase. My own existence was minimally represented. A single graduation photo tucked on a side table. My father was waiting in his study, seated behind his mahogany desk, like a CEO preparing for a business meeting, rather than a conversation with his daughter. I took the seat across from him, placing my portfolio on my lap. "You said you wanted to discuss something important," he said without preamble. "I hope this isn't about the will again." "That matter is settled." I had planned to ease into the conversation gradually, but his dismissive tone changed my approach. "Actually, I'd like to talk about Grandma Charlotte's trust," I said, watching their reactions carefully. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat, while my father's expression froze momentarily before he recovered. "What trust?" he asked, his voice deliberately casual. "The irrevocable trust she established before her death," I continued. "The one that stipulates the family home and other assets are to be divided equally among all 3 grandchildren." My father's jaw tightened. "Your grandmother had certain ideas about estate planning that weren't practical. We made adjustments." "You can't adjust an irrevocable trust, Dad. That's why it's called irrevocable." "Emma," my mother interjected, "these are complicated legal matters you don't understand." "Actually, I understand them quite well now," I said, opening my portfolio and removing the trust documents. "I've spoken with Arnold Fitzgerald. He explained everything." The mention of my grandmother's attorney caused visible alarm. My father's face flushed, while my mother sank slowly into a nearby chair. "Arnold is elderly and confused," my father attempted. "He's misremembering." "His mind is perfectly clear," I countered, "and the legal documents speak for themselves." I laid out the trust paperwork on the desk, pointing to the key provisions. The family home, the Lake Champlain property, and the investment accounts are all held in trust for all 3 grandchildren equally. "You never had the authority to exclude me." My father's expression hardened. "If you're planning some kind of legal challenge, I'm not here to threaten you," I interrupted. "I'm here to understand. Why didn't you tell me about the trust? Why pretend these assets were yours to distribute when you knew they weren't?" My parents exchanged glances, communicating silently in that way long-married couples do. "We did what we thought was best for the family," my mother finally said. "By hiding my inheritance from me? By letting Sarah forge documents to gain control of the trust assets?" I kept my voice level, despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. I pulled out the next set of documents, the forged trustee transfer papers, with Arnold's supposed signature that Sarah had submitted to his former law firm. After Arnold retired, Sarah presented these documents claiming he had transferred trusteeship to you. Arnold confirmed he never signed these. "The signature is a forgery." My father examined the papers, his expression shifting from dismissal to concern. For the first time, I sensed uncertainty in his demeanor. "Sarah wouldn't do that," my mother insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "She did," I replied. "And there's more." Over the next hour, I methodically presented the evidence we'd gathered. Financial records showing Jake's mismanagement of company funds, documentation of improper access to the trust accounts, emails between my siblings discussing ways to turn my parents against me. My father became increasingly agitated as I presented evidence of Jake's business misconduct. The company had been his life's work, and the documentation of mismanagement, fund diversion, and potential tax fraud clearly shocked him. "These numbers can't be right," he insisted, scrutinizing the financial statements I'd provided. "Jake would have told me if the company was in this position. He's been hiding it from you, Dad. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy, and he's been siphoning money out before the collapse." My mother, meanwhile, seemed most affected by the emails between Sarah and Jake explicitly discussing their campaign to undermine me. "They couldn't have meant this the way it sounds," she said weakly, reading an email where Sarah suggested using my divorce as ammunition. "They meant exactly what they wrote," I said gently. "They've been manipulating both of you for years." My father stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. "I need to call Jake. These accusations are backed by evidence I finished for him. And if you call Jake now, he'll have time to cover his tracks. Is that what you want?" His face flushed darker, and he pressed his hand to his chest. I recognized the gesture immediately, the same one he'd made during his heart episodes last year. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked, concern overriding everything else. He waved me off, but his breathing was labored. "Just give me a minute." "Richard?" My mother stood, alarmed. Despite everything, I moved quickly to his side. "Sit down, Dad. Put your head between your knees." I turned to my mother. "Get his medication from the bathroom cabinet." She hurried out while I helped my father to his chair, guiding his breathing the way I'd done countless times during his recovery. Slow and steady. That's it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, once again caring for the father who had just tried to disinherit me. When my mother returned with his pills, I made sure he took them with water, monitoring his color until his breathing normalized. "You still remember," he said quietly after a few minutes. "Of course I do. I took care of you for months, Dad." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite recognition, but a crack in the certainty. When he had stabilized, I returned to my seat. "I didn't come here to cause you distress. I came because you deserve to know the truth before I take legal action." "Legal action?" My mother's voice rose sharply. "I've consulted with an attorney. The trust gives me legal standing to challenge the current arrangement. Sarah's actions could result in disbarment. Jake could face criminal charges for financial improprieties." My father's face had paled again, but not from his heart condition. "You would do that to your own family?" The question stung with its hypocrisy. "You mean the family that told me I don't deserve anything? That I'm worth less than my siblings because I chose art instead of business? That family?" My mother began to cry softly. Not her usual theatrical tears designed to manipulate, but genuine, confused sorrow. "We never meant to hurt you, Emma." "Maybe not intentionally," I acknowledged. "But you let Sarah and Jake convince you I was somehow less valuable, less worthy of love and recognition. You played favorites their entire lives, and they learned from your example that some family members matter more than others." I pulled out my grandmother's journals next, opening to marked passages. Grandma Charlotte saw it happening. That's why she created the trust in the first place, to protect me from exactly this situation. My father read some of the passages, his expression unreadable. "Your grandmother always did favor you," he said finally. "She didn't favor me, Dad. She saw me. There's a difference." The room fell silent as the weight of decades of family dynamics hung between us. "What do you want, Emma?" my father finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I want acknowledgement. I want the trust administered as Grandma intended. And I want you to open your eyes to what Sarah and Jake have been doing before they destroy everything you've built." I stood, gathering my documents. "You have a choice. Either we handle this as a family, with you taking appropriate action to correct the situation, or I'll file legal proceedings naming all of you as defendants. I'll give you 1 week to decide." As I turned to leave, my mother spoke up. "How do we know you won't do exactly what you're accusing them of?" Take everything once you have control? I paused at the door. Because unlike them, I have evidence to back up my character. I showed up when you were sick. I put my life on hold to care for you. I'm not the one who lied, forged documents, or stole from family. Judge me by my actions, not by the stories Sarah and Jake have told you. I left them sitting in stunned silence. My father still clutching my grandmother's journal, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. As I drove away, I felt an odd mixture of emotions. Grief for the family I'd never truly had, relief at finally speaking my truth, and uncertainty about what would come next. The ball was in their court now, and all I could do was wait to see what they would choose. 5 days after my confrontation with my parents, I received a terse text message from my father. Family meeting. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Home. No pleasantries, no context. Typical Richard Westfield communication. I consulted with Alex immediately. This could be good or bad, he advised. They've had time to verify your evidence, but also time to coordinate with your siblings. Be prepared for anything. Should you come with me? I asked. Not initially. Your presence alone might make them defensive. But I'll be on standby, just text if you need me to join remotely. The next day, I arrived at my parents' house exactly at 2 p.m. My portfolio once again filled with evidence, my phone recording, and Alex on standby. I was surprised to find I was the last to arrive. My parents, Sarah and Jake, were already seated in the living room, an unusual tableau of family togetherness. Jake looked confident, lounging on the sofa in an expensive suit, scrolling through his phone. Sarah sat primly in an armchair, legal notepad on her lap. Both looked up when I entered, Jake with a smirk, Sarah with narrowed eyes. Finally decided to show up, Jake commented. I'm exactly on time, I replied, taking the remaining seat across from my parents. As always. My father cleared his throat. Your mother and I have been doing some investigating since our conversation, Emma. We wanted everyone here to discuss the situation as a family. Jake's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of uncertainty. What situation? My mother twisted her hands in her lap. There seemed to be some irregularities with the family finances and your grandmother's trust. Sarah immediately sat straighter. What trust? The innocent act might have been convincing if I hadn't already seen the emails proving she knew all about it. I remained silent, watching the dynamic unfold. My father turned to Jake. Son, I've been reviewing the company books. There are discrepancies I can't explain. Jake's confidence visibly faltered. The economy's been tough, Dad. I've had to make some creative accounting decisions to keep us afloat. Creative accounting? My father's voice rose. You've been writing checks to companies that don't exist. Sarah jumped in. Dad, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Jake's been under tremendous pressure managing the business. And you? My mother turned to Sarah, her voice uncharacteristically hard. Did you forge Arnold Fitzgerald's signature on the trustee documents? The direct question caught Sarah off guard. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, I finally spoke. It's a fact. Arnold confirmed it. Jake stood abruptly. What is this? Some kind of ambush? Emma's been filling your heads with lies because she's jealous. She's always been jealous of our success. I calmly opened my portfolio and removed a copy of the forged document. Is this your signature on the witness line, Jake? He glanced at it, then away. So, what if it is? The old man was retiring anyway. So you admit to participating in document fraud, I noted. Sarah stood now too, lawyer mode activated. This is ridiculous. You can't prove any of these allegations. And even if there were some technical irregularities with the trust administration, the statute of limitations has likely expired. Actually, I said, fraud tolls the statute of limitations. And we have ample evidence of ongoing fraud. We? My father questioned. On cue, my phone rang. I answered and put it on speaker. Alex, you're on with everyone. Hello, Westfield family. Alex's professional voice filled the room. I'm Alexander Peterson, Emma's attorney. I understand we're discussing the Charlotte Westfield Trust and related financial matters. Sarah's face drained of color. You had no right to involve outside counsel in family business. The same way you had no right to use your position at Parker and Williams to handle family legal matters that constituted a clear conflict of interest? Alex countered. Conflicts that your firm's ethics committee might be interested to learn about? Jake turned on me, his face contorted with anger. You ungrateful little. He took a step toward me, fists clenched. Jake! My father stood, moving between us. Control yourself. This is all your fault, Jake snarled at me. If you had just stayed in your lane with your paintbrushes and your gallery openings, everything would have been fine. But no, you had to start digging. The truth would have come out eventually, I replied calmly. The company can't sustain the level of mismanagement much longer. Mismanagement? Jake laughed bitterly. I've been keeping that dinosaur of a business alive while Dad refused to modernize. If I moved some money around, it was to save us all. You mean like the $200,000 you moved to your personal offshore account? I asked. My father staggered slightly. What offshore account? Sarah attempted damage control. Jake, don't say anything else. This conversation is clearly being recorded. Oh, now you're concerned about legal propriety? I raised an eyebrow. Were you concerned when you told the probate court you couldn't locate me to notify me about the trust, despite having my address and phone number? My parents looked at Sarah in shock. You did what? My mother whispered. Sarah's composure finally cracked. I was protecting our family interests. Emma would have squandered her share on art supplies and bohemian apartments. The family legacy deserved better. Legacy? I repeated. You mean Grandma's legacy that she specifically wanted divided equally? The one you actively conspired to keep from me? She always favored you, Sarah spat. Her precious artistic granddaughter who could do no wrong. She didn't favor me, I corrected. She recognized that Mom and Dad favored you and Jake. She was trying to create balance. Jake, seeing the situation deteriorating, switched tactics. Look, maybe we got carried away. But Emma, you have to understand. You've always been different from the rest of us. You don't understand business or family responsibility. We were protecting the assets from your artistic whims. My father turned to Jake. Something new in his expression. The way you protected the company by running it into the ground? By falsifying financial reports to me. Your father? You weren't listening to my ideas, Jake shouted. You wanted to run things the same way you always had. Sometimes you have to take risks to succeed. Risks? Is that what you call embezzlement now? My father demanded. As Jake and my father argued, Sarah tried another approach with my mother. Mom, you know how Emma has always been dramatic. This is just another attention-seeking performance. My mother's response surprised us all. Is that what you think of your sister? After she spent months caring for us while you were too busy to visit more than twice. The façade was crumbling. Years of carefully constructed narratives about me. The irresponsible artist. The family disappointment. Were collapsing under the weight of evidence and truth. Jake, cornered, lashed out. Fine, you want the truth? I've been fixing Dad's mistakes for years. The business was already failing when I joined. And yes, I took some money. Money I deserved for saving a sinking ship. And the trust? I pressed. Did you deserve Grandma's money too? Money that was legally mine? You wouldn't have known about it if Sarah hadn't slipped up. Jake blurted out, then immediately realized his mistake. Sarah gasped. Jake. Slipped up? How? My father demanded. Jake glared at Sarah. She accidentally mentioned the lake property transfer to Emma last Christmas. She was supposed to keep her mouth shut about all trust assets. Sarah's face flushed with anger. And you were supposed to keep the business solvent instead of gambling company funds on your idiotic cryptocurrency investments. They turned on each other like wolves, years of alliance forgotten in the heat of self-preservation. Jake revealed Sarah's systematic manipulation of our parents through selective information and outright lies. Sarah exposed Jake's business failures and personal excesses funded by company money. My parents watched in horror as their perfect children tore each other apart, revealing uglier truths with each exchange. Enough! My father finally thundered, his face alarmingly red. Both of you, stop this instant. The room fell silent. My father turned to me, his expression unreadable. Emma, would you give us some privacy with your siblings? I nodded, gathering my things. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard my father's voice, lower but intense. "How could you do this to our family? To my company?" I waited in the kitchen, texting updates to Alex and Melissa. After nearly an hour, I heard raised voices, then the front door slamming twice in quick succession. A moment later, my mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes red and puffy. "Your father would like to speak with you," she said quietly. Alone. I followed her back to the living room, where my father sat in his armchair, looking suddenly older than his 65 years. My mother excused herself, heading upstairs. "Sit down, Emma," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I complied, waiting. "I owe you an apology," he began, the words clearly difficult for him. "It appears I've been misinformed about many things." "That's one way to put it," I acknowledged. "Your siblings have been asked to leave and not return until they're prepared to make amends." His voice was strained. "Your mother and I need time to process everything we've learned today." "And the trust?" I asked directly. "We'll honor Charlotte's wishes," he conceded. "The trust will be properly administered with a neutral trustee, as it should have been all along." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. "Thank you. I want to be clear," he continued. "I'm angry about being deceived, about the company mismanagement, about the legal improprieties. But I'm not ready to say I was wrong about everything." It was a partial acknowledgement at best, but from my father, it was unprecedented. "I understand," I said. "This is a lot to take in all at once." "Your mother would like to talk with you tomorrow," he added. She needs some time tonight." As I stood to leave, he asked, "Was it worth it? Tearing the family apart like this?" The question gave me pause. "I didn't tear the family apart, Dad. I just exposed the cracks that were already there. Maybe now we can start building something honest." He didn't respond, but for the first time in years, he actually seemed to be listening to what I said. As I drove away, I realized this wasn't the triumphant victory I had sometimes imagined, nor was it the catastrophic implosion I had feared. It was messy, painful, and unresolved, but it was real in a way my family relationships hadn't been for decades. It was a beginning, not an ending, and for now, that would have to be enough. The weeks following the family confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional conversations, and gradual recalibrations of family relationships. The process of restoring proper administration of my grandmother's trust began immediately, with a court-appointed neutral trustee taking control of all assets. The legal consequences rippled outward. Jake's financial misdeeds at Westfield Manufacturing couldn't be hidden once proper auditing began. He was formally removed from the company, and my father faced the humbling task of disclosing the irregularities to the board of directors and implementing a financial recovery plan. Sarah faced her own reckoning. When her law firm learned of her ethical violations related to the trust, they placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation. The State Bar Association opened an inquiry into her conduct, particularly the document forgery, a potential career-ending offense for an attorney. My father, ever the businessman, approached the family crisis with surprising pragmatism once the initial shock wore off. 2 weeks after the confrontation, he called me with an unexpected request. "The company needs help, Emma," he said, his voice gruff but without its usual commanding tone. "We're implementing a restructuring plan. And, frankly, we could use someone with integrity overseeing certain aspects." "I'm an artist, Dad, not a business executive," I reminded him. "You're also the only family member who hasn't tried to defraud me," he replied dryly. "And you have organizational skills I've clearly undervalued. I'm not asking you to run the company, just to help save what can be saved." I agreed to consult on a limited basis, establishing clear boundaries from the start. "I'll help with the restructuring committee, but my art career remains my priority. And I want a formal contract with fair compensation. No family favors." His approval was grudging but genuine. "That's reasonable." Working with my father in a professional capacity created an unexpected bridge between us. He witnessed firsthand my attention to detail, my creative problem-solving, and my ability to mediate difficult conversations, skills I'd developed as an artist, but that translated well to business restructuring. "You're good at this," he admitted one evening after a particularly challenging meeting with investors. "You have your grandmother's head for seeing the whole picture." It was perhaps the first unqualified compliment he'd given me in decades. My relationship with my mother evolved along a different path. Where my father processed the betrayal through action, she retreated into a period of reflection. After several canceled lunch dates, she finally agreed to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet tea room downtown. "I've been seeing a therapist," she confessed over Earl Grey and scones. I needed to understand how I could have been so blind to what was happening. "What has she told you?" I asked. "That I've spent my life trying to create the perfect family image, even when it meant ignoring reality." Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "I favored your siblings because they fit the picture I wanted to project. You challenged that picture." It wasn't quite an apology, but her honesty was unprecedented. "I'm not asking you to approve of my choices, Mom," I said carefully. "Just to acknowledge that they're valid for me." "I'm trying," she replied. "It's difficult to change how you see things after so many years." These tentative steps toward reconciliation coincided with an unexpected professional breakthrough. A curator from the Whitney Museum visited my studio, interested in including my family-themed mixed media series in an upcoming exhibition on contemporary expressions of familial relationships. "These pieces are raw and complex," she noted, studying the triptych. "There's anger here, but also deep love. It's compelling work." The validation of my artistic expression felt particularly meaningful given the family context. When the exhibition was confirmed, I sent formal invitations to my parents, not expecting their attendance but wanting to extend the gesture. Meanwhile, my siblings took divergent paths. Jake, facing potential criminal charges for financial misconduct, left town abruptly. Rumors suggested he'd fled to a non-extradition country, though no one could confirm his whereabouts. Sarah, always more strategic, approached her situation differently. After the initial shock and denial, she began a careful campaign of damage control. She contacted me through her personal attorney, proposing a settlement agreement that would include a formal apology and financial restitution for trust funds she had improperly accessed. "I don't need your money, Sarah," I told her during our first face-to-face meeting in months. "I know," she replied, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "But I do need to make this right, legally and otherwise." "Why?" I pressed. "You've never cared about making things right with me before." She stared into her coffee for a long moment. "My therapist says I've been competing with you our entire lives. For attention, for approval. I never saw you as a sister, just as an obstacle." The admission stunned me with its honesty. "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm trying to see you as a person," she said simply. "It's harder than I expected." While genuine reconciliation with Sarah remained uncertain, these conversations represented the first authentic exchanges we'd ever had as adults. The most profound healing, though, came through my connection to my grandmother. Using my portion of the trust funds, I purchased a small cottage near a lake. Not the grand family home, but a peaceful retreat where I could work and reflect. While cleaning the attic, I discovered a cache of letters my grandmother had written to me but never sent, stored in an old hat box. "My dearest Emma," one began, "I see so much of myself in you. Not just your artistic talent, but your generous heart and clear eyes. The world will try to convince you that these qualities are weaknesses. They are your greatest strengths. Trust them, as I trust you." Reading her words, written when I was just a teenager but still so pertinent, brought a sense of connection that transcended the family conflict. My grandmother had seen me truly, had valued precisely the qualities my parents had dismissed. 6 months after the confrontation, the legal matters were largely settled. The trust was properly divided, with my portion under my control. The family business was stabilizing under new management, with my father taking a reduced role focused on client relationships rather than operations. Sarah's law license was suspended for a year, a significant penalty but not career-ending, thanks to her cooperation with investigators. My parents and I established a tentative new relationship, not the close bond some families enjoy, but an honest one with clear boundaries and mutual respect. We met monthly for dinner, carefully avoiding the weightiest topics at first, gradually building capacity for more difficult conversations. During one such dinner, my father surprised me by asking about my art. "I've never really understood it," he admitted. "What are you trying to express with your work?" Instead of dismissing the question as he would have in the past, he listened attentively to my explanation of my creative process and thematic interests. He didn't suddenly transform into an art enthusiast, but his genuine attempt to understand meant more than artificial appreciation would have. My mother, meanwhile, began sending me newspaper clippings about art exhibitions and gallery openings, her way of acknowledging my world. Small gestures, but meaningful in their context. As the one-year anniversary of the confrontation approached, I reflected on the journey. The family that existed now bore little resemblance to the one I'd grown up in. The façade of perfection had been shattered, revealing the complicated, flawed reality beneath. But in that reality, there was a possibility for authentic connection that had never existed before. The path to justice had been necessary but painful. The road to reconciliation remained long and uncertain. Yet I found myself more at peace than I'd been in years, secure in my understanding of the truth and my place within it. In my latest series of paintings, I began exploring themes of growth and renewal. Broken systems rebuilding themselves in new forms, stronger at the mended places. The work was being noticed, with galleries in New York and Los Angeles expressing interest in exhibitions. Life wasn't perfect, and neither was justice. My family wasn't healed, but it was healing. And I was finally free to create my own definition of success, untethered from my parents' limited vision. As my grandmother had written in one of her final letters, "True family is built on love that sees clearly, not love that looks away." Remember that, Emma. When the time comes to build your own. I was remembering and building accordingly. The Whitney Museum was buzzing with the elegant murmur of an opening night crowd. My exhibition, Family Systems, occupied the central gallery space. 18 pieces exploring themes of betrayal, truth, justice, and healing. At the center hung the triptych I'd created during the darkest days of the family confrontation, now accompanied by a new companion piece showing fragmented elements reassembling in a different configuration. I circulated among the attendees, discussing technique and inspiration, accepting congratulations from colleagues and critics. The New York Times reviewer had called the work unflinchingly honest, yet ultimately hopeful, a masterclass in transforming personal pain into universal truth. The validation felt sweet, but no longer essential to my sense of worth. Midway through the evening, I spotted them near the entrance. My parents, looking slightly out of place but unmistakably present. My father wore a dark suit, my mother an elegant blue dress I'd never seen before. They stood examining the exhibition catalog, tentative but determined. I excused myself from a conversation with a gallery owner and crossed the room to greet them. "You came," I said simply. "We said we would," my father replied, a new humility in his tone. Impressive turnout. My mother squeezed my hand. "The work is beautiful, Emma. Painful, but beautiful." Coming from her, this acknowledgement meant everything. I guided them through the exhibition, explaining concepts and techniques in terms they could relate to. My father asked surprisingly insightful questions about my creative decisions, while my mother seemed particularly moved by the pieces depicting childhood memories from altered perspectives. "I never realized how differently you saw things," she admitted quietly, studying a mixed media piece showing a family dinner scene distorted through different lenses. "Were we really so blind?" "We all see through our own filters," I replied. "I'm still learning to adjust mine, too." After the tour, we stepped onto the museum's terrace for a moment of quiet amid the busy event. The Manhattan skyline glittered before us, a fitting backdrop for this milestone moment. "The business is stabilizing," my father offered, reverting to the topic where he felt most comfortable. "The restructuring plan you helped develop is working." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "How are you finding the new role?" He shrugged. "Different, less pressure, more relationship building. The new management team is solid." What he didn't say, but I knew from our monthly meetings, was that the company was smaller now but healthier, focused on sustainable growth rather than the aggressive expansion that had nearly destroyed it. "Have you heard from Jake?" I asked. My mother's expression tightened. A postcard from Singapore. No return address. Jake remained the family's open wound, refusing accountability, choosing exile over reconciliation. The legal matters had been partially resolved through his forfeiture of remaining assets, but the emotional closure remained elusive. And Sarah? I asked. Though I knew the answer. She's completed the ethics course requirements, my father reported. The suspension ends next month. Sarah's path had been different. A difficult but genuine attempt at amends. Our relationship remained complicated, but we'd established a cautious rapport built on honesty rather than competition. She was attending therapy regularly, working through the patterns that had driven her destructive behavior. She asked about you, my mother added. Wondered if you might be willing to meet for coffee when she visits next week. Maybe, I said, neither committing nor refusing. Our healing process had its own timeline, independent of external expectations. As the evening wound down, I invited my parents to join me the following weekend at the cottage I'd purchased with my portion of the trust funds. Not my grandmother's Grand Lake house, which had been sold as part of the settlement, but a modest, charming retreat where I'd established my new studio. I found more of Grandma's letters, I explained. I thought you might like to see them. My father hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. There's a lot about my mother I never understood. It was an admission that would have been impossible a year ago. An acknowledgement of his own limited perspective that signaled genuine growth. After they left, I rejoined the exhibition, accepting congratulations and discussing sales with the curator. My professional success felt particularly sweet given the journey that had inspired the work. The pieces born from family trauma were now launching my career to a new level. The following Sunday, I hosted a small dinner at my cottage. Not just my parents, but also Aunt Margaret, Melissa, and her husband, and even Sarah, who had arrived in town early for her reinstatement hearing. The gathering wasn't perfect. Conversation sometimes stalled, old tensions occasionally surfaced, but it was authentic in a way our family interactions had never been before. After dinner, we sat on the deck overlooking the small lake behind the property. As sunset painted the water in shades of gold and pink, I shared some of my grandmother's letters, reading selected passages that revealed her wisdom and insight. She knew us better than we knew ourselves, my mother acknowledged, tears in her eyes. Aunt Margaret nodded. Charlotte always saw clearly. It's why Richard found her so frustrating sometimes. My father didn't deny it. She would be pleased with how things have turned out, he said instead, gesturing to our gathered family. Not the conflict, but the truth that came from it. Later, as we cleaned up together, another novel experience, my mother paused while drying a wine glass. I'm proud of you, Emma, she said quietly. Not just for your success, but for your strength. For making us see what we didn't want to see. It wasn't a complete healing of our relationship, but it was a significant step. Perhaps the most meaningful my mother could take given her own limitations and history. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone on the deck with my grandmother's journals and a glass of wine. The past year had transformed so much. My family relationships, my professional standing, my understanding of my own worth. The betrayal that had triggered everything had led, through pain and conflict, to a truer version of family than I'd ever experienced. My grandmother's final journal entry, written just weeks before her death, seemed particularly apt. Family isn't what we pretend to be for each other. It's what remains when the pretending stops. We had stopped pretending. What remained was imperfect but real, a foundation that could, perhaps, support something authentic moving forward. Not the family I had wished for as a child, but one I could engage with honestly as an adult. The journey had cost me much, but had given me something precious in return. The freedom to be fully myself, no longer seeking validation from those unable to provide it. The ability to set boundaries without guilt. The clarity to see my family members as they truly were, rather than as I wished they would be. As the moon rose over the lake, I raised my glass in a silent toast to my grandmother, whose wisdom and foresight had set in motion the painful but necessary transformation of our family system. The journey wasn't over, but the path ahead felt hopeful in a way I couldn't have imagined a year ago. I wish I could tell you family relationships are simple, But as my story shows, they're anything but. Has my experience resonated with you? Perhaps you've faced similar family betrayals or had to stand up for yourself against loved ones. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey has meant something to you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is worth it, even when it's difficult. Your support means the world to me, and I'm grateful for this community we're building together. Remember, the most authentic relationships are often born from the hardest truths. Until next time, this is Emma, signing off with gratitude and hope.